listening to Awake in Relationship, a podcast about intimacy, community, and culture in a time of great change, with Silas Rose.
Hello friends, my name is Silas Rose, and you are tuned into Awake in Relationship. With the rise of Omicron, the new COVID variant, many of us are probably thinking a little bit more than we'd like to right now about health and what it means to be healthy. And without doubt, it really is kind of a scary situation with cases surging despite the vaccine. Facing another winter of possible lockdowns and restrictions, it can be easy to lose heart. Whether we're talking about the pandemic or the climate crisis or perhaps social justice issues, the news tends to highlight the fundamental and often painful differences between nations, political parties, friends, and even family. We are living in a very polarized time, and the extreme emotions of hatred and fear that are being generated are making it very difficult to respond sanely to a rapidly changing world. And with the rise of the new variant, I think there's the real possibility of things getting more intense. As we head into the holiday season and now a fifth wave, it's really important to remember that compassion is what will unite us, and despite whatever's going on in our world, health is really intrinsic. Health is the foundation of our humanity. This is a bigger view of health, beyond just the body. Really relates to an unshakable sense of sanity and goodness, which we can connect to through various practices and certainly through cultivating healthy relationships. This is why I want to invite back my friend Melissa Moore, director of Karuna Training, and a recent author of a new book, The Diamonds Within Us, Uncovering Brilliant Sanity through Contemplative Psychology. In this conversation, we discuss how fear and polarization create pathology both in the mind and culture, and how self-compassion is the first step in the healing journey. We also discuss specific practices connecting to intrinsic health and working with strong emotions. If you're wanting some potent tools for working with fear and uncertainty as we enter the fifth wave, this episode is for you. Melissa Moore, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So for those that haven't tuned into our previous conversation on compassion exchange, you've come out with a new book, The Diamonds Within Us. And it might be helpful just to do a quick recap. Tell us a little bit about your history and how did this book come to be?
Well, I've been teaching something called Karuna Training for going on 28 years now, and I started that in Europe, or I actually started in the States when I studied at Europa, and then took contemplative psychology and uncoupled it from therapeutic training and just brought it in a more general context. Karuna means compassion, of course, so it was more like compassion training. We started out in Germany, and then it grew from there to, it's been held in 9 countries so far, and over the years we've learned a lot and kind of focused on the curriculum. And the book came out of an inspiration I had 15 years ago, and I finally got around because of COVID, because I got trapped at home, literally. I had the energy and the wherewithal to write. And I had a good editor to help me, which was a student who was working and doing some PR for us. So it got going, and it came, and it was birthed finally. And it's a very necessary book from the perspective of Karuna Training, because it's like a textbook on contemplative psychology, but I wove it with a lot of memoir, my own experience and meeting the teachings. So it's a very personal, vulnerable account as well, which is pretty much how we teach in Karuna, to befriend our vulnerability and find our strength through that. So the book is kind of a testimony to that.
And it's quite appropriate that it got, conceived during the pandemic. Because I think a lot of us have been focusing on health and what it means to be healthy. Normally, that's we do that in relationship to pathology, and that's something you explore a lot in the book. And much of it focuses on this notion of intrinsic health. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Well, intrinsic health, simply put, is unconditioned health, meaning it's not conditioned by the norms that we usually think of as healthy. So one possesses intrinsic health, or this, we also sometimes call it basic sanity, despite our relative conditions. And it's really the ability to work with things as they are in an open and kind way. It's the ability to show up in equanimity and find ourselves in the circumstances we're in and relate to them directly. And really what we're pointing at is the humanity within us. And that humanity that feels, that can respond and can care and open and can love innately, that aspect of ourselves that's can be available to the world as is instead of a contrived conceptual idea of what we should be doing or what we think we are and all those preoccupations we get into, which is not health, in particular, it's distraction. So we're really talking about synchronizing. We often talk about finding our intrinsic health through synchronizing our body, our speech, and our mind in the present moment, because usually those things are going in different directions.
So how do we lose it? Because I think if I look around and look at my own experience, I'm often not synchronized.
Right. I mean, it's me too. I mean, we have to really be thoughtful because we have much more practice at desynchronization than we do at synchronization. It's not something that unfortunately, we're not taught this in kindergarten, although some children are being taught now about mindfulness, which is great. But I think that we have unconditioned health, whether we're in tune with it or not. So it's not something that goes away. And it's a question of uncovering it or finding it within ourselves. And health is such a loaded word these days because what do you think of when I say health? I mean, what's your first thought?
I think of COVID.
Right. You think of COVID, but a lot of people will think of having a toned body and being able to run a marathon or looking a certain way or, there's all kinds of projections. This word is really a troubled word. And so this unconditioned health really is an experience that has to be discovered. And we utilize meditation and contemplative methods. Again and again, you could say all the work in contemplative psychology is focused on this view of intrinsic health, that there's nothing to fix. That's a huge, takes away 90% of what we're trying to do all the time, which is feel better. Nothing to fix. That's very hard to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't really have a reference point for that in our culture. Unlike other, say, traditional cultures, where that synchronization, basically the mind-body connection, mm-hmm. is somehow implicit. It's everywhere. Mm-hmm. That I know in, say, Chinese culture, I studied Chinese medicine. The sense that the mind is actually the abode of the mind is in the heart.
Yeah.
Whereas in our culture, mind is the brain.
Right. Yeah, it's and there are so many indigenous and traditional cultures that understand that synchronization. It's true. It's really Western culture that's caught up.
It does seem that allopathic medicine and even psychiatry are starting to kind of tune into that.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think a lot of natural healing and certainly psychology is deeply influenced by Buddhism and mindfulness right now and compassion training. And so I think that I think, maybe there's, it looks like there's a lot of bad news going on in the world, which is very easy because if you read the headlines, you can become overwhelmed. But we also could step back and say there's a lot of good news happening too. I mean, I think that could become a practice in terms of this evolution of consciousness that's happening in understanding. I'm hearing it in a lot of different quadrants. It's not just in the West world, but a lot of people are understanding like, oh, things are really different right now. The weather is changing. Our relationship to politics and justice is changing. We're seeing that we're being fed algorithms. There's a lot of awakening happening, right?
Ultimately, it kind of comes down to what we focus on, in the sense that the algorithms are kind of, in some regard, pulling us into a realm.
They do. It's just like in meditation. If you believe everything you think, you'll go crazy on the cushion, right? When you're in this media world that's feeding you back your own thoughts, it's just making things very solid very quickly.
Central to the mind-body connection is really the role of the emotions. How does contemplative psychology work with emotions, particularly the strong ones like anger, fear?
Well, one of the great things about the contemplative psychology that we teach in Karuna Training is it's based on the Vajrayana teachings that understands the inseparability of confusion and wisdom energetically. But you don't just dive head into that energetically. It's really about learning what emotions are, how they operate in our being on a moment-to-moment basis with our conditioned existence, with our biases and all of that. You have to study the whole package, and emotions are a piece of it. But with respective to emotions is like, really the basic training is not learning how not to suppress them, which is very habitual. So you don't really even know you're doing that until you really study it. And knowing when you're acting it out, when you're also acting it out. And there's a middle space where you can meet the energy as it is without suppressing it and without acting it out. And that happens only in the present moment. And that's what makes it contemplative psychology, is that we study that. And we study it through the mandala of the 5 Buddha families, which is a beautiful array of all the possibilities of the elemental aspects of the world as well as the emotional aspects of the world. And we study that in community. And so we have to befriend all the emotions, because within the emotions, within those poisonous emotions like anger and jealousy and the ones we have trouble with, is our resource, our greatest resource, our wisdom. So we'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face when we're trying to get rid of our anger, because anger has a purpose. We feel our emotions for a purpose. So, but we have to have training. You don't just dive into the deep into the pool. You have to first learn not to be in total reaction with your emotions. You have to really investigate through meditation and contemplative methods your habitual tendencies with emotions. And then you have to befriend the energy and begin to trust the energy, which you won't do if you don't believe in intrinsic health.
So you see that the energy, say, of anger and motion, or when it's not stuck or when it's not fixated, that could be, in some sense, an expression of the intrinsic health.
Yes, for example, if you don't know the energy of anger, that sharp energy that can be boundaried, and it's very knowing, it's a very head energy, and anger is fueled by justification. It's always about being right. So if you get out of the coupling of needing to be right and you just experience the energy as it is, you'll find that it has a purpose, and its big purpose is no. It's boundaried. It's sharp. It has an energy and it sees clearly. And so it can see clearly in multiple perspectives too. It's very wise. So so learning about that quality, most of us are I grew up very afraid of anger. My father was the only one allowed to be angry in the family. And so it took me a long time and a lot of repression and to find that energy and trust it and learn to speak it. And then I went overboard the other way, where I was like a 2-year-old saying no to everything. Right? So we have to find the continuum of our energy and learn how to exercise it. They all have purpose.
So we talked about the mind-body connection in terms of our personal experience, and there really is this kind of larger context to that, which is really our personal connection with society. Mm-hmm. And it's in the same way that we become, fragmented through conflicting emotions, or maybe you might say unskillful relating to our inner world. Mm-hmm. Our outer world is very fragmented. It seems almost impossible to be healthy in a sick society. What do you think?
Well, I actually think that, again, that health is there whether we're in touch with it or not. It's a matter of coming into contact with it and doing the proper things in our life to cultivate it, which most of us don't have the actual freedom and privilege to do, because that would be like staying in retreat a lot, or I don't know what the conditions would be that would evoke more sanity in this. But I think any of us functioning with jobs or interacting with the internet are constantly bombarded, and it's very hard to keep a stable mind. But I think the job is, no matter where we are, is to work on how we are in reaction to the world. It's really about our responses. So when we talk about society, there's like this small society, like our close friends and our network, the people that we agree with, our inner world, or maybe we don't agree, but we're in contact with those people or acquaintances. Then there's the greater society, which is the norms of the day, right? Which are extreme right now, right? There's a lot of extremity, extreme social action, social justice. And so there's many, many variations. So I think that intrinsic health is not dependent on any of these conditions. That we can learn to drop out of that conditioned experience and feel ourselves in our heart and tune into the present moment and experience the elements and come back to our senses, literally, and find our intrinsic health and nurture that without being, bombarded. But it takes mind training and heart training and perseverance. I've been doing this for many years, and I do lose heart when I get up and read headlines in the morning. This is deadly for me, and yet I'm addicted to it. And that's been proven. We get an adrenaline rush every time we read them, right? And so we're getting highly conditioned to that. Phones and devices, right? So even though I know all this, it's like what I'm trying to remember now is what's told in the headlines isn't the whole story. Like, think about those people who are in Kentucky right now and Tennessee who have lost everything, right, just 2 days ago. And the devastation, there's matchsticks from these tornadoes. And what's not told in the headlines yet, or it will be told a little bit, but not much, is the profound helping hands that are showing up, and the love and the food and the care. And there is an outpouring for people who are in those situations. And there's health there. In other words, people are relating to the situation as it is, even though it's devastation. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
So turning our allegiance again and again to health is, in a societal context, is keeping this bigger perspective that humans are good for the most part. There's some bad conditioning that happens, and we like to scream that from the mountaintops in all of our apps, our neighborhood apps, and it's disheartening if you go in that direction. Much harder to keep an open view about humans, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit earlier, in the sense that much of the discord that we experience, that can be personal, in terms of our own self-referencing or self-image, or it could be in terms of our relationship with current events. It really begins online. And there's something I'm been trying to figure out, maybe you have some insight, into this. There's something about our technology or how we engage with our technology that just completely, in many situations, disables our ability to kind of self-regulate. Yeah. What is that?
Well, if I study it in myself, it's like when I turn to the devices to fill the space, which I often do. I mean, I'm conditioned to do that now, right? You know, if I have a gap in the airport, I look at my phone. I'm looking for my phone to fill in the gaps, right? Instead of experience the gaps. So I don't know. I think it's a mind, like any addiction, it deadens the mind, right? It's a form of suppression. It's a form of distraction. It's a form of desynchronization, right? You're reading about Afghanistan and you're in California waiting for a plane and on, right? And you're getting text messages about some urgent thing going on somewhere else, right? We're completely desynchronized. So I think that we have to take device holidays. I have 1 day a week. I can't do it with my phone because of text messages, but I don't get on emails 1 day a week. I'm very proud of myself about that because I'm a compulsive worker, right? I like to get the job done and there's an endless amount of work to do. So, it's really difficult. I think kindness to ourselves about it and really seeing the pattern and the norm of it going on. Sometimes if you just go to a bus stop and look at all the people on their phone or any bus or any airplane, it's shocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just realizing that we're caught in that. And, the analogy of wearing out an old shoe, that we have to feel the pain of that over and over again until we are able to kind of let it go.
Yeah, the irony of it all, really, and this is what I see in Karuna, because in Karuna we don't do it we do it on Zoom sometimes, but we're not using our phones in the training specifically. We're relating to each other. And what I see is that in this time when we can connect in a nanosecond, and we're all looking for connectivity, right? That's what the adrenaline rush is about. We're getting a contact high when we get a little message. And we're looking for that, right? But it's not really a contact. It's just a virtual concept. And so when it comes to human beings and we can look in the eyes and have this kind of one-on-one exchange, this is much more, really, I think what we're looking for is this nakedness together.
Yeah, being seen.
Yeah.
I imagine many people listening to this conversation, wish that we lived in a more kind of compassionate society. But it's really seems kind of unclear how we're going to get there, given the level of polarization. It seems on a policy level, it's not possible that we're always going to find ourselves back in this zero-sum game between opposing sides. So if I follow the thread of this conversation, it really kind of begins with ourselves and with self-compassion.
Well, I'm an Orthodox Buddhist, so I save the word compassion to mean selflessness. And the word we use in Karuna is maitri, which is the same. The reason why self-compassion is such a compelling slogan is because there's this step in forming compassion, which is a selfless act that requires that we love ourselves first. We must befriend ourselves and have sympathy for ourselves in our own pace first before we can let go of ourselves to be available for others, which is what compassion is from an Orthodox perspective. And I realize this self-compassion is in common parlance now because we're not trained in loving kindness towards ourselves. And in the word maitri, in fact, has no translation in English. So we use this word self-compassion that's really grown recently out of the mindfulness movement. But what we're really talking about is this warmth of heart towards ourself, which is the first step of forming, being able to let go of self. First, you have to love yourself. It's amazing. It's just counterintuitive, but we think that, selflessness is like giving up, leaving yourself behind. But it turns out that we're part of the compilation.
Intrinsic health really seems to be a very present moment experience, in some sense, beyond thought. I think that's why people like to hang out with dogs.
I agree.
Because they're just naturally joyful. They just exude love. And there's no second thought in it.
Do you have a dog?
No, it's whenever I end up on land, I'll probably get a dog, but
I have a 17-year-old pug, and she is definitely my best friend.
Yeah, no, I'm just convinced that dogs are here to give love to the world. But I also think that's why people, intuitively just want to spend more time in nature.
Yes.
It connects us with something very primordial. What I'm wondering is, how can we cultivate that as a practice? Certainly mindfulness is a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think actually what we've been really leaning into since COVID and before, but much more since COVID, is this practices that relate us directly to the elements. And what I'm talking about is, say, earth, fire, air, water, and space, which correlate with the 5 Buddha families. But these elements are sacred. They're not neither for us nor against us. And so studying and turning our mind to the elements, tuning into our ability to experience the elements through our sense perceptions in the present moment. When we can't sit down on a cushion when we go for a walk and our mind is buzzing, can we tune into the trees and the greenery and so forth to pull us out of ourselves into the world? That is a great practice. Just the ability to pull ourselves into the present moment and exercise that muscle of mind. You don't have to be a meditator for that. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of communion with the sacredness of the elements can become a great teacher. And whether they know it or not, going out into nature is that communal exchange with that which we are. We're not separate from that, but we feel like we have to go out in nature. That's how we've insulated ourselves. But we are that. There's nothing in the world, in ourselves or in the world, outer, inner, or secret, that is beyond the elements. They're the makeup of everything. So I just think that is a very good contemplation and also place to train your mind to be present.
Melissa, thank you so much. And how can people get your book or learn more about what you do?
Well, The Diamonds Within Us is on diamondswithinus.org is its own book. And also karunatraining.com is how you find more about it. And there's a link to my book there. So, please, we have a lot of free trainings in Karuna that you can come and just get a taste of our style. And so karunatraining.com, the Getting Started button, lets you find out where those are. And just, I really appreciate this awake in relationship, because when I think about it, if we're training anything in Karuna, it's to be awake in relationships. So I feel there's a lot of simpatico in our missions. So thank you, Silas.
Thank you. Well, happy holidays, and we'll talk soon. Thank you again, Melissa, for some potent reminders on kindness and what it means to be healthy. If you want to find out more about her work, head to karunatraining.com, or you can grab her book at diamondswithinus.org. I'll post some links in the show notes at awakenrelationship.com. If you've been enjoying the content on Awaken Relationship, don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you have a moment, I'd really appreciate a quick review. It really helps me to grow the show. I'm in the process of envisioning what 2022 will look like for this show. It's been a real journey up to this point. I feel like I'm kind of finally getting my podcast legs and ready to kind of lean into some more kind of provocative topics and ideas around relationships. So if you have any suggestions for guests or topics, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. You can also send me a quick message through the contact page on my website at awakenrelationship.com. So I'm wishing you a very happy solstice and holiday. Dear listener, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay well and stay connected.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Awake in Relationship. If you liked what you heard, please click subscribe to get the latest show delivered fresh to your device, or sign up for our newsletter at awakeinrelationship.com. Sharing is caring.